Many of the great men of the Old Testament had more than one wife. Solomon, for example, had 700 royal wives and 300 concubines. His father, David, had at least 8 wives. Patriarchs like Abraham and Jacob also had multiple wives. Looking at these men who are so important to our faith, we ask, why did God allow polygamy in the Bible? Is this evidence that the Bible is a sexist book, as some suggest, or is this practice correct and should still be followed today? To explore this topic, we need to remember that marriage was not a human invention. God gave the first woman to the first man and presided over the first marriage ceremony. Moses comments on this by saying, "For this reason a man shall leave his father and mother and be united to his wife," in the singular, "and the two shall become one flesh." This is God's standard as taught in the Bible. We must distinguish what the Bible teaches as the divine pattern for relationships from the historical accounts of God with His people. These relationships are called covenants. A covenant is like a marriage, where two parties make a commitment of dedication, loyalty, and fidelity to each other. God created this kind of relationship with Adam and Eve, but they were disloyal, didn't believe His word, didn't obey, and plunged humanity into chaos and evil. God then made a new beginning with Noah, who also failed. Then God made a covenant with Abraham and his family, and later with Israel, Abraham's family. The whole story of the Old Testament is about how human partners are unfaithful, disloyal, don't believe in God's word, don't obey His rules, rebel, and want to establish what is right and wrong for themselves. In this story, we see a constant violation of the original divine pattern. Abraham, for example, didn't trust God's promise to give him a son and tried to work it out with Sarah's handmaid. Later, Abraham had to send away his own son, the fruit of this haste. Jacob also had 2 sister wives, and this was not a harmonious relationship. The Bible shows that polygamy brings all kinds of problems. The book of Judges says that the judges had many wives because they aspired to be kings, but most people in the ancient Near East had only one wife. Only kings could afford to have many wives. When we read the Bible carefully, we realize that it does not promote polygamy, but shows us royal figures who had many wives, and even for them, this was not ideal. Polygamy caused difficulties, problems, and fights between the wives, and was not a satisfactory relationship. This is proven in the case of David, when the prophet Nathan told him a parable about a man with many sheep and a poor man with only one sheep. When a visitor arrived, the rich man, instead of killing one of his sheep, stole the poor man's only sheep. This story shows that, despite having many wives, David wasn't satisfied and ended up stealing another man's only wife. Solomon also got into trouble because he didn't practice what he preached. Although his wisdom is evident in his writings, he didn't live according to his own principles. He multiplied his wives, which is expressly forbidden for kings in Deuteronomy 17, where it is written that the king shall not have many horses, shall not send his people to Egypt to buy them, shall not take many wives so as not to turn his heart away from the Lord, and shall not hoard large amounts of silver and gold. The king shouldn't marry princesses from other countries to avoid political alliances that would make him trust in those alliances and not in the Lord. He shouldn't multiply horses so as not to trust in military power, nor should he accumulate gold so as not to trust in his ability to pay for his own freedom. The king should trust in God. Biblical history shows that, although they were men of faith, they were not examples of morality. The New Testament and the teachings of Jesus and the apostles never present the men of the Old Testament as examples of morality, but rather as examples of faith. There is a clear difference between what God commanded and instructed about marriage and how His people actually behaved, as recorded in history. The biblical narrator is not saying that polygamy is a good thing. On the contrary, he shows that it is bad, creating many problems and not offering a satisfactory way of living because it abandons the pattern of divine creation. See you next time.